2021, Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. A cold January morning, business as usual for travelers, but not for the man walking calmly toward his gate. Tse Chi Lop, the shadowy mastermind behind a 17 billion pound drug empire, was moments away from vanishing once again, bound for Canada.
Now, the alleged ringleader of Asia's biggest crime syndicate and one of the world's most wanted men has been arrested in the Netherlands, with Australian authorities pushing Sunday for his extradition to face trial.
He had evaded the world's top law enforcement agencies, slipping through borders and identities like smoke. But this time, the net had finally closed. Plainclothes officers moved in quietly, surrounding him without fanfare. No sirens, no struggle. The kingpin of Asia's meth trade was taken down not in a hail of bullets, but in eerie silence, brought to his knees by a decade-long investigation involving over 20 countries. For the first time, the man dubbed Asia's El Chapo was no longer a ghost, but a prisoner. This man is alleged to have led Sam Gore, also known as The Company, a syndicate comprising members from 5 major triads. Operating across the Asia-Pacific, Sam Gore's operations spanned from Japan to New Zealand, with methamphetamine production hubs in Myanmar's Golden Triangle. Australian authorities estimate that Sam Gore was responsible for up to 70% of the methamphetamine entering their country. Despite his arrest, experts warn that the infrastructure Tse built remains intact, and the demand for synthetic drugs continues to fuel the market. As we delve into the untold story of Asia's El Chapo, we ask, can the fall of one kingpin dismantle an empire, or is this just the tip of the iceberg? His empire supplied millions worth of meth and dominated global markets. But how did he rise to power? How did he evade capture for decades? And why does his legacy still haunt law enforcement today? Before his name became synonymous with one of the most powerful drug empires in the world, Tse Chi Lop was just another face in the crowd. Born in Guangzhou, China in 1963, his early life gave few hints of the criminal mastermind he would become.
At that point, we believed that Tse Chi Lop was running the organization.
If Lop stay in China, forget it.
Like many ambitious young men, Tse dreamed of a better life. In his 20s, he immigrated to Canada, settling in Toronto where he worked everyday jobs, quiet, diligent, under the radar. But behind that modest exterior, Tse was laying the groundwork for a global criminal legacy. In Toronto's immigrant neighborhoods during the 1980s and 90s, Tse slowly integrated himself into the local Chinese underworld. It was here that he made contact with members of the Big Circle Gang, a transnational Chinese triad with deep ties to heroin trafficking out of Southeast Asia. Founded by former Red Guards who fled China after the Cultural Revolution, the gang operated with military-like precision and secrecy. Tse, with his strategic mind and cold efficiency, was a perfect fit. And he didn't just blend in, he rose quickly. By the mid-1990s, Tse had become a key figure in international drug trafficking. But in 1998, just as his empire was beginning to take shape, U.S. authorities caught up with him. He was arrested and later sentenced to 9 years in prison for his role in a heroin smuggling operation. Behind bars, most would assume his story ended there, a cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. But Tse was no ordinary criminal. While incarcerated, he remained quiet, observant, and, most importantly, calculating. He used prison not as punishment, but as a planning. When he walked out of prison nearly a decade later, he didn't return to Canada. He returned to Asia, and this time, he wasn't interested in climbing someone else's ladder. He was going to build his own. Tse united 5 of Asia's most powerful triads, including the infamous 14K and Bamboo Union, under a single umbrella, Sam Gore. This wasn't a loose alliance. It was a multinational enterprise with Tse as its silent CEO. And unlike the bloody cartels of Mexico, Sam Gore valued discretion. Tse rarely made public appearances, used coded communication, and remained virtually invisible, even as his empire flooded the Asia-Pacific with drugs and raked in tens of billions of dollars. His power stretched from the jungles of the Golden Triangle to the streets of Melbourne and Tokyo, and all the while, authorities knew he existed, but couldn't touch him.
They tend to fly under the radar in the shadows, and that made it so much harder for anti-organized crime squads to figure out who's the one running things.
How does a man build a drug empire the size of a nation's GDP and remain a ghost? That's the mystery of Tse Chi Lop, a man whose rise from Toronto's alleyways to the summit of Asia's criminal hierarchy left a trail of shattered lives, stunned governments, and one terrifying question. If this was the rise, what would the fall look like? You've heard of cartels, but not like this. No blood-soaked jungles or public shootouts. No flashy Instagram-worthy stunts. Just cold, calculated control. Welcome to the world of Sam Gore, the corporate-style drug syndicate built by the elusive mastermind himself. Sam Gore wasn't just a cartel, it was a finely tuned machine. And at the heart of its engine, meth, pure, potent, and mass-produced on a scale the world had never seen.
Sam Gore is really likely the largest group that engineered the shift we've seen underway in the drug trade in East and Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand over the past half dozen, 7-8 years, where there's been this massive surge of crystal meth hitting the region. Behind that surge was very tight, well-controlled organization that functioned in a way that we hadn't seen before, essentially as a business network, bringing together different skill sets.
Tse's brilliance wasn't in brutality, it was in business. While Latin American cartels were making headlines with chaos, Tse was quietly rewriting the playbook. He brought together 5 of Asia's most powerful triads, organizations that had, for decades, waged turf wars against each other, and forged an alliance that shocked law enforcement worldwide. Uniting the triads under one roof, Tse built a structure that mirrored the world's biggest corporations. There were boardroom-style meetings, cost-efficiency strategies, and a chain of command that would make Fortune 500 execs jealous. Sam Gore's headquarters wasn't in a glass skyscraper, but its empire stretched from the ports of Guangzhou to the streets of Sydney. Its factories? Hidden deep in the Golden Triangle, the infamous region where the borders of Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand blur into a lawless jungle. Here, protected by corrupt local militias and crumbling governments, Sam Gore set up sprawling meth labs capable of producing tons of high-grade crystal meth each week. The quality, unmatched. The quantity, industrial. By 2015, Sam Gore was elbow-deep in Australia's methamphetamine market, flooding the country with ice at a pace law enforcement couldn't match. Australian cops dubbed it the tsunami, a wave of addiction and violence washing over their cities, all traced back to Tse's operation. And the logistics? Absolutely bulletproof. Drugs were stashed in cargo ships, hidden inside legitimate seafood shipments, slipped onto fishing boats, and even smuggled through commercial flights with the help of corrupt airline workers. Sam Gore didn't just move drugs, they delivered. If a shipment was seized by customs, the replacement would arrive before the buyer could complain. And not a gram was charged extra. It was the Amazon Prime of meth. Customer satisfaction was a pillar of Tse's empire. Law enforcement agencies in Australia, the US, and Southeast Asia were left scrambling. Sam Gore operated so smoothly, so quietly, that for years, they didn't even know what they were dealing with. It was like cutting off the head of a hydra. This one wore a suit, never raised his voice, and always stayed 10 steps ahead. The meth machine was running full throttle, and at the helm of it all was a man no one could find. The quiet Canadian immigrant who became Asia's most wanted criminal. For years, Tse Chi Lop was a ghost, a phantom moving through the shadows of the global drug trade, his name never mentioned aloud, his image unknown even to the agents hunting him. But behind the scenes, he orchestrated one of the most lucrative narcotics empires on Earth, a syndicate so vast, so meticulously managed, it took over 20 countries to mount an operation big enough to chase him down. That operation was Kungur, a name whispered in law enforcement circles like a code word for a near-impossible mission. Governments across Asia-Pacific and beyond knew they weren't dealing with a conventional cartel. Meth seizures were spiking across Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, and they all bore the same signature, a chemical fingerprint tied to high-purity meth produced in labs buried in the Golden Triangle. The shipments were getting larger, the routes were more sophisticated, the corruption more widespread. And still, no one knew who was at the top. All they had was a code name, the Boss. The DEA, Australian Federal Police, Interpol, and authorities from Thailand, Japan, and China began quietly piecing the puzzle together. Financial investigators tracked massive money laundering operations through casinos in Macau, shell companies in Hong Kong, and underground banking systems in Canada. And slowly, a name emerged from the smoke: Tse Chi Lop. But Tse wasn't just cautious, he was a master of anonymity. He never used his real name on business documents. He rarely traveled on his own passport. He spoke in code, delegated through layers of trusted lieutenants, and often held meetings in private jets or in neutral territories like Taiwan or Myanmar. He was never armed, never flashy, and always 5 steps ahead of the law. For a while, it looked like they'd never catch him. Then, in 2019, a series of exposés by investigative journalists cracked the case wide open. Reporters from Reuters published a bombshell report revealing Tse's real identity and linking him to Sam Gore's billion-dollar meth operation. The story sent shockwaves through law enforcement, finally giving Operation Kungor the name and face it needed. But Tse didn't panic. He'd slipped through tighter nets before. He was still in control until he made one critical mistake. On January 22, 2021, Tse was arrested at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport, moments before boarding a flight to Toronto. There was no last stand, no dramatic escape, just the cold click of handcuffs and the end of an era. The arrest was hailed as one of the biggest in modern organized crime history. But it left behind a burning question. Had they caught the real Kingpin, or just another puppet in a deeper game? Because even behind bars, the ghost of Tse Chi Lop still lingers. And Sam Gore, it may be down, but no one's quite sure if it's out. To most people, he looked like just another businessman. Quiet, polite, impeccably dressed. The kind of guy you'd pass on the street without a second glance. No gold chains, no entourages of Instagram influencers, no social media flexing. And yet, behind that unremarkable exterior, Tse Chi Lop was one of the most powerful and elusive drug lords the world had ever known. Dubbed Mr. Normal by authorities, Tse cultivated an image so mundane, it was almost genius. While Latin American narcos posed with tigers and Lamborghinis, Tse kept things low-key. He disappeared into the background, sipping tea in quiet hotel lobbies, holding meetings in business lounges, and avoiding any trace of digital breadcrumbs. His weapons, strategy, patience, and a Rolodex of corrupt officials and veteran traffickers. His movements, calculated, infrequent, and often disguised under aliases. But make no mistake, the man knew how to live, when he wanted to. Traveling mostly via private jets, he was always surrounded by an elite security team, including 8 trained Thai kickboxers. These weren't just bodyguards, they were his human firewall, skilled in combat and loyal beyond reason. While his methods were rooted in brutal efficiency, his persona was almost Zen-like. Those who worked with him described him as calm, calculating, a man with an MBA's brain and a warlord's instincts. That combination made him nearly untouchable. His ability to fly under the radar became part of his mythology. And that's what made Mr. Normal so terrifying. His restraint was his power. The less attention he drew, the more invisible he became. The more invisible he became, the stronger Sam Gore grew. But that invisibility couldn't last forever. As global drug seizures began pointing toward a singular source, and as journalists and agencies started connecting the dots, Tse's carefully woven cloak of normalcy began to unravel.
He will continue to pursue people who, as I said, peddle that misery in this country and think that because they're not in the country that they're untouchable.
The myth was cracking. But until the day he was arrested, most people still didn't know his name. Because that's how Mr. Normal operated. In plain sight, just out of reach. Tse Chi Lop may be sitting in a cell, but don't let that fool you. The empire he built still breathes. His arrest in 2021 was a seismic win for law enforcement, but experts warn this wasn't the end. Why? Because Tse built Sam Gore like a Fortune 500 company. Every region had a manager. Every operation ran on systems. The drugs didn't stop moving because one man was caught, because by design, they didn't need him anymore. This was corporate crime at its most evolved.
We will also allege the syndicate used money laundering remitters in Australia and offshore to pay for the drugs and deal in the proceeds of crime. This included the unlawful use of a bank account in the name of an Australian casino.
Sam Gore was never about a flashy central figure pulling all the strings. it was about decentralized power. Labs in the Golden Triangle still churn out meth by the ton. Trafficking routes through Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and Australia remain active. And with methamphetamine demand skyrocketing, especially in Southeast Asia, the market is far too lucrative to abandon. New players are stepping into the void. Old lieutenants are becoming bosses. The machine keeps running. So yes, Tse Chi Lop is in custody, but the blueprint he left behind, it's still out there, and it's working. The Kingpin may be gone, but his kingdom endures. Gone are the days of flashy gangsters and predictable turf wars. Today's crime lords wear suits, speak multiple languages, and run billion-dollar operations like global CEOs. Tse's rise wasn't an anomaly, it was a blueprint, a roadmap for how the underworld now thinks, operates, and thrives in a world of digital anonymity, corporate fronting, and international loopholes. His arrest was a major victory, but was it a knockout punch or just a jab? Because here's the hard truth. As long as there's demand, there will always be supply. So, can law enforcement truly take down these modern crime syndicates? Or are we just scratching the surface of an even darker future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If this story blew your mind, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and smash that bell icon so you never miss our wildest deep dives into the world's most jaw-dropping true crime stories. See you in the next one.